So we're going to talk about how to think like a Christian in a world that doesn't. And I think that'll become more obvious to you as we walk through the material. So let me give you my background. My wife, Wendy, is here with me. Our 4 children are all grown and out of the house. We've got 1 in Colorado, 1 in Atlanta, and 2 in Austin. We have been members of Grace since we moved to Katy, Texas from Midland, Michigan in 2001. And I retired from a marketing job at Dow Chemical. Wow, it's been almost 7 years ago now. And I lead a program in Houston called the Colson Fellows Program, which is really focused. It's a 10-month discipleship program, and it's focused on understanding and applying biblical thinking. And I'll use the word throughout, as at least if I remember correctly, I'll use the word biblical as opposed to Christian, because there's a lot of people that claim to be to think like a Christian, but really are more cultural Christians than what I would call biblical Christians. So I use the word biblical more than I use the word Christian because of that. And at some point, I'll give you some more information on the Colson Fellows Program if you're interested in that. All right, so we're going to start with a video about worldview. And so let me stop sharing this and start sharing that.
This is Sasha. This is Sam. When they first met, it was just small talk about where to find the best coffee, the new high top she just bought, a book of poetry he found at a used bookstore, a new local band she discovered just last weekend, a zombie apocalypse movie he saw last night with some friends from his martial arts class, her homemade screen print t-shirt, and his favorite Chinese restaurant, which made them both hungry. So they got 2 orders of Mandarin chicken with brown rice. And then Sam opened his fortune cookie. Life's journey ends with a new beginning.
Whoa, that's deep. But in the real world, life's journey ends with an ending. When you die, you're done.
Well, yes, your body no longer works, but your soul continues to exist, don't you think?
Your soul? No, I don't believe in ghosts. We're physical creatures, material objects, just a collection of highly organized atoms. When your brain flatlines, that's it. Game over.
So you don't believe in life after death?
No. I mean, it's a comforting thought, but there's just no scientific evidence for it. I'd rather face the real world than believe in a fairy tale.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sam. It's best to face reality, but it may be that life after death is reality. I mean, think about it. If life just ends at death, then everything we do or say comes to nothing. What meaning or purpose can our lives possibly have?
Well, I guess my life has whatever meaning I choose to give it. I personally believe in truth, beauty, science, making the world a better place, saving the environment, freedom of speech, and, tolerance.
Yes, that's all well and good. But what does all that matter if it ends in nothingness? What are your thoughts about God?
Which God? There are millions of gods.
The God that's in the Bible.
It's been proven that the Bible is just a bunch of mythology written by ancient desert nomads. But if faith in God makes you feel good, I won't argue with that. But I personally prefer more of a rational, open-minded approach to life. Here's what I believe, Sasha. You shouldn't think anything is true unless it's been scientifically proven.
But has that belief itself been scientifically proven? Sam, you and I look at life very differently.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like we're from different worlds.
Not different worlds, different worldviews. A worldview is the set of lenses through which you see the world around you. It's a web of habit-forming beliefs that helps you make sense of all your experiences. Through your worldview, you interpret life in a particular way. It affects how you think, how you feel, and how you live from day to day. To understand what your worldview is, think carefully about the big questions of life. Does God exist? How did everything begin? Who am I? Why am I here? Am I living a good life? What happens after I die? Cabbages and puppies don't think about this stuff, but people do. Reflecting on these questions is part of what makes us human. In fact, every one of us has a worldview. What's yours?
All right. So that video does a nice job of sort of overlaying or giving you an overview of the concept of worldview, which is what we're going to spend this first chunk of time on. And the first session really is on the worldview introduction. The second session, we're going to talk about the biblical worldview. What exactly is the biblical worldview, and how can we apply it to a number of different topics? And then we'll look at the major competing views in the West, which are primarily this concept of naturalism, i.e. there is no God, and also what I would call moralistic therapeutic deism, or this concept that God is good, and if you do enough good things, you'll earn your way into heaven. And then the next week, we're going to look at the other ways that people think, which are primarily the other religious worldviews. So Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and we'll do a summary. And then the last 2 weeks, what we'll do is we'll take some of what we learned in the first 4 weeks, and we'll try to apply it to two different current issues. And we'll look at that list later in the discussion. And next week, we'll vote, and I'll get your votes, and we'll pick the two topics that get the most votes, and we'll cover them and have a great discussion on that. So in today's session, we're going to talk about why worldviews matter. We'll define a worldview. We'll analyze the different worldviews that are out there, and I'll try to give you an easy chart so you can see how the different worldviews are different. And then we'll look at some of the big questions that exist, and again, look at the worldview options that are out there. So why do we want to do this? Well, first we want to understand ourselves, right? We all have a worldview. It's really, as I'm going to show you in a second, I believe the foundation of our ideas, our values, our behaviors, and to reduce and eliminate inconsistencies, we really need to be able to understand our worldview. We need to understand our worldview to be able to live and share our faith. We want to exhibit a consistent, clear, and complete Christ-honoring life. We want to show the superiority of the Christian worldview, and we want to rise to the challenges when other people who deny Jesus push back on us. We want to be able to understand how others think in order to be able to better understand how they see their world and the root causes of the conflicts that exist. We want to be able to understand and identify and refute those worldviews. And we also want to avoid being deceived by the allure of some of these competing false ideas. And finally, as we'll especially look at in the last couple of weeks, we want to be able to propose solutions to issues which align with our Christian worldview. So what's the definition of a worldview? It is a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart that can be expressed as a story or a set of presuppositions, assumptions that may be true, partially true or false, which we hold consistently, conscientiously or subconsciously about the basic constitution of reality that provides a foundation for which we live and move and have our being. So that's a very complicated definition. Some things I pull out of that is an orientation, a set of presuppositions, things that we believe in that sort of define for us reality, and ultimately talk about how we live. Some other ways to look at a worldview. It's an explanation and interpretation of the world, and then how we apply that to life. It's a comprehensive life system that answers all of humanity's age-old questions, like where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? And does life have any meaning or purpose? It's the sum of all our beliefs about the world and the big picture that directs our daily decisions and actions. It's a frame of our most basic beliefs of and for the world. Graphically, what is it? It's the glasses that we view the world through. It's one way to think about it. Or it's the map we use to make decisions about where we're going. Or it's the puzzle box that we look at when we're trying to put together all the pieces that don't seem to fit together very well. A worldview serves sort of as the base of our pyramid. Off of our worldview, we build our values and we build our behaviors. Or looking at it a different way, if the worldview is in the middle and it defines what is real, then our beliefs define what we think is true. Our values define what is good. And based on all of that, our behavior then is what we do. But if we're consistent, then our behavior comes from our worldview, which comes from our beliefs, which comes from the values. And it's why we see things so differently. So here's just a small set of the list of things that people see very, very differently. And why do they see them differently? In most cases, because they have a different worldview, a different set of base assumptions about the world. And we'll talk about some of those as we go forward in the class and how the different worldviews see these things differently. So let me break here. I'm going to show you a short video from Ravi Zacharias, who talks about how you would analyze a different worldview.
I was walking through the Newark airport some years ago. It was about 6:30. I'd taken a long 14-hour flight. I think it was from Bangkok or somewhere. And as I was walking, went to the gate, I looked at the marquee, and it showed a different flight to mine. I was looking for my flight to Atlanta from Newark. And so I tapped the lady on the shoulder and said to her, "Is this going where it says it's going, or is it supposed to be going to Atlanta?" She said, "Oh no, it's going to Atlanta. That's just a previous flight." I said, "Well, good to know that." So I turned around to walk away and I heard the patter of feet behind me. And then she tapped me on the shoulder. She said, "Excuse me, are you Ravi Zacharias?" I said, "I'm afraid so. Yes, I am." She said, "That is absolutely amazing. I never thought you would have questions either." The fact of the matter is, we all have questions. I believe there's a difference between a question and a doubt. A question is probing, trying to unpack, trying to get deeper and deeper into a subject. A doubt sort of becomes a stumbling block in your journey to an answer. I look at a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grid, and I'll give you this and then start the answer to the first question, because I think this is very critical. 1, truth is the ultimate goal in all of our questions and our pursuits. Truth is the most valuable thing in the world. It was Winston Churchill who said in warfare, truth is the most valuable thing in the world. It's so valuable that oftentimes it's protected by a bodyguard of lies. We have to get to the truth. Number 2, how do we test the truth? There are 2 broad theories. One is called the correspondence theory, the other is the coherence theory. When you go into a court of law and a witness is being asked to give answers, the attorney is looking for 2 components here. Are the answers corresponding to reality? And when all of the answers are put together, is there a coherence to these answers? So it is generally acknowledged that there's correspondence and coherence. And then 3, you test the truth by logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and experiential relevance. Is it logically consistent? Is there an empirical way to verify this, or is just an assertion that is not even falsifiable? And ultimately, is there any experiential relevance to this? 1, truth. 2, correspondence coherence, 3, logical consistency, empirical adequacy, experiential relevance. 4, there are 4 questions you deal with: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Now, it's very important what I've just said to you. A worldview deals with these 4 subjects. Where did I come from? What gives life meaning? How do I differentiate between good and evil? And what happens to a human being when he or she dies? Origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Now, to get to these, this is the biggest challenge. There really are 5 disciplines you have to pull together, especially in a worldview that's claiming all of the answers are there for these questions of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. God, knowledge, reality, man, morality. God deals with theology. Knowledge deals with epistemology. How do I get to this? Reality deals with metaphysics. Morality deals with ethics, and man deals with anthropology. So you've got theology, you've got metaphysics, you've got epistemology, you've got morality, and you've got anthropology. All of this brought into that. So as I attempt to answer your questions, remember, this is what I'm actually trying to accomplish: present to you the coherence of the Christian worldview, how it is coherent and consistent with all of the claims that it makes. If you counter that, you have to put your worldview to the same test. Can you really put the answers together with the 5 various disciplines, the 4 questions, the 3 tests, the 2 categories, and the ultimate pursuit of truth? I just wanted you to have that in your background. Now I can go home and you can start asking yourself the questions here. The issue of the gaps. Science will one day conquer everything, every agnostic terrain.
Okay, well, we're not going to get quite that deep in the discussion, but we are going to cover some of those things, and you're going to see why he feels that's so important, and I agree with him. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. And I'm not going to talk about this in great detail, but I am going to just review for you real quickly what he said. And I'm going to send you a copy of these slides and links to those 2 videos. And the Ravi one, that was just him setting up at the beginning how he was going to answer all the questions. He spends about the next hour in that video answering questions from people, some of which are worldview questions and some of which are on other topics. So if you remember, he sort of set things up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there was the same number of things as each of the numbers. So one issue, which is truth, is the ultimate goal. And then he had 2 categories to test for truth, and those are listed there. He had 3 ways to test truth claims, and what each of those are and what they mean is listed here. And then he had 4 ways, 4 questions that worldviews need to answer. Most of the lists I'm going to show you actually have 5 because they include identity as well. And actually Ravi, when he talks about this nowadays, talks about identity as part of that as well. And then the last one was the 5 disciplines that you need to look at when you're answering some of these questions. So let me make a few more comments about assessing a worldview. First, worldview claims that differ about the same thing cannot both be true at the same time. If one is true, the other must be false, and that comes from the law of non-contradiction. If the foundational premises are false, then the conclusions will also be false. That's another logic law. So let's look at some of these worldview questions that exist. The first one that typically comes up is origins. Where did everything come from? Is there a God? What's the nature of ultimate reality? What's really real? Meaning, why is there something rather than nothing? What is the meaning of life? What is our purpose? Morality. Is there a right and wrong? Why does it seem that the world is not as it should be? Identity. What is a human being? Who am I? Why am I here? How do I fit in? And destiny. What happens after we die? Where is history going? As you'll see as we walk through these different worldviews and we answer these questions for each of the worldviews, they come with significantly different answers to these questions. And because they answer these questions differently, they draw different conclusions about how we should live in the world today. There's another way to break this up. You can actually break the origin question up into this two other questions, which is, what is the nature of ultimate reality? What's really real? And is there a God, which sort of falls into the faith bucket. So that's that 7 set of questions is a way another one of the leading worldview people looks at this issue. One of the books that we read in the Colson Fellows program is called How Now Shall We Live? And they break worldview into this concept and sort of align it with the Bible, right? Where do we come from is the creation question. What's gone wrong with the world is the fall question. What can we do to fix it is the redemption question. And how now shall we live is the restoration question. Okay, so let's take a break and see if anyone has a question or if there are any questions out there in the chat. So you guys can unmute yourself if you want, if anyone has a question. All right, let's go on then. Okay, so let's look at some of the worldview options that are out there. And this diagram sort of gives you it gives you this concept over on the left of this transcendentalism, which we'll talk about in a second. Up above it, we've got the concept of atheism or naturalism. And then what you see in the picture on the right is Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem is the home to 3 of the world's great religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So one of the ways that you can classify these different worldviews is to look at this question of, is there an ultimate reality? Is there truth? Can truth be discovered? And surprisingly, there's one worldview that says truth is not knowable, or it's socially constructed and each person can have their own truth. And the way that truths fight each other is whoever has the most power can force their truth on other people. And that worldview is called postmodernism. And we'll look a little at that in a couple weeks. But most of the other worldviews actually believe that there is a truth that can be understood and its truth is knowable. And so then what happens is you break this into the bucket, but what does the world look like? Okay, and a naturalist will argue that there's only a physical or a material world, that there's no spiritual component to the world. And so a naturalism, which is expressed in things like materialism, secularism, scientism, atheism, and agnosticism. So atheism is the belief that there is no God, and agnosticism is the belief that it doesn't matter if there's God or not. Those are some of the ideas, and then you can see some of the expressions that come out of the naturalistic concept that there's only the physical material here and now. Transcendentalism, which covers some of the major other worldviews, the Eastern worldviews, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, believes that the world is actually an illusion and that there's only a spiritual component. And so that leads them down a whole different path of explaining things that are in the world. And then there's what I would call theism. So this is the belief that there's both a material and a spiritual world with a personal God. And the traditional theism options would include biblical Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and then there's this deistic concept, and the major deism concept that you see out there today is what I call moralistic therapeutic deism, and that's a mouthful. We'll talk about that some more in a couple weeks. So that's the picture. When you put them all on there, you get these four big buckets. You've got this naturalism bucket, knowable with physical material only. You've got the transcendentalism bucket, knowable with a spiritual component only. You've got this theism component, which says the truth is knowable, and there's both material and spirituality, a spiritual component with a personal God. And then you've got this other bucket over to the right, which says truth is not knowable. How they know truth is not knowable is one of the most difficult questions that they have to answer. So if you believe in reality, you believe that there is a truth and it's knowable, then another way to divide these is based on your view of the divine. And so there are 5 dominant views of God. There's this theism or mono, one God, a deism view, which is sort of a distant, detached God, atheism, which there is no God, a pantheism, which is this concept that God is everywhere, and polytheism or spiritualism, which says that there are multiple gods. So let's take a look at that view of the world. So the mono gods, or the theists, believe that there's one God. He is interacting, involved with his people, and those are the 3 main religions that you see there: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. A deist believes that there is a God, and this is why there's a yellow box around him, though, but he's not really at all involved in our world. He's outside of our world and not really all that interested in what's going on. Created the world, but he's no longer actively participating. Distant God. Then we have the atheists who say there is no God. So you see on this drawing, there's no God in the picture, just people. And there's lots of different ways that plays out. And the difference between those is, as they try to explain how the life has a purpose without God, they come up with all kinds of different purposes that they insert in the place of God. And that's why you see the different iterations of that. And then we have this pantheism view that's everything is God. We're all God. We're all part of God. And the person that cuts my hair believes this. And we have some very interesting discussions. And what she says to me doesn't seem to make any sense at all to me when she talks about stuff. But she talks about it and she sees no conflict between her perspective and, the reality that we see out there. The world is an illusion, but somehow she's cutting my hair. So makes for very interesting discussions. And then there's those that believe there are all kinds of gods out there, that there's spirits, and Mormonism is an example of this, where you can all become God, so there's a whole list of religions there that believe in multiple gods. And of course, the postmodernist doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe truth is knowable, or it's self-defined, and so they all live in their own little bubbles, not a common bubble where a truth can be discovered, but their own little bubble where they can all have their own truths. So one of the things that we'll do, we won't do it today, but one of the things we'll do is we'll walk through this chart as we go through the other worldviews, and we'll talk about how they view some of these big issues like God and humanity and body, soul, and knowledge, and ethics and history and destiny. And that will give you a nice comparison of the different worldviews and their beliefs as it applies to some of the things that are out there that we see in the world.